welcome to everybody who's been able to join today. Good to see you. If I can ask you to have your audio muted and your cameras on, that would be great. Thank you. So I'd like to introduce Robert, who will be presenting to us today. Robert's an experienced MD, FD, with a background in many things, as well as the commercial sustainability. So I'll hand over to you now, Robert. Thanks very much.
Climate change is obviously a huge subject, and 20 odd slides are not really going to cover very much of it, but hopefully it will provide a flavour for some of the information you've maybe not seen for a while or not seen ever, and prompt a few thoughts. So here we go. Firstly, we've had about we have had 8 ice ages in about the last 800,000 years. So that's 100,000 years per ice age. In broad terms, 50,000 years for CO2 levels to go down from 300 to 200, and the same time for them to go back up to 300. We, as a species, have driven that up from 300 up well past 400, not in 50,000 years, but in 50 years. So as a metric, that is quite shocking. Al Gore was looking at this information long before he became US president. He was researching in climate on the top of one of the volcanoes in Hawaii, where the air is just about as clean as it gets. And this is what they saw. Because most of the land mass is in the northern hemisphere, in our summer, the plants all photosynthesize, and in the winter they die back, rot away, and so you get effectively the Earth breathing in and breathing out carbon dioxide once a year. For 800,000 years, it's done it in equilibrium. Right now, it's anything but in equilibrium. And there's the evidence for it. We had a slight respite during lockdown in 2020, 2021, but that aside, CO2 emissions keep going up in spite of current efforts to build ever more renewable energy sources and turn that curve around. As well as CO2 emissions, which are not great for the climate at large, the EU estimates that there are 300,000 premature deaths every year because of air pollution. The UN estimates 5 million globally. And what you can see, amongst other things on the map, the Alps is a nice light blue colour, lots of fresh air, but immediately below that, the single most densely industrialized area, the northern plain in Italy, is not a great place for breathing fresh air. And most of the UK population is living in suboptimal air conditions. If you're out on the extremities, then better breathing. This is what the EU hopes it will look like in 5 years' time, which is absolutely going in the right direction. Even if we're still very much wrestling with CO2, air pollution is on the wane. In terms of what's been done about it over the years, the UK was the world's first country to bring in a Clean Air Act, which it did back in 1956 on the back of many pea supers in London and so on. We've had now 29 COP meetings to address it, Kyoto being a memorable one, the third one in 1997. For my money, Glasgow was an important one 4 years ago. It's when people started to talk about net zero and getting there by 2030. Not for everybody, but for big corporates and public sector bodies. They could see that if the whole planet was going to get to net zero by 2050, they needed to take the lead and get there quicker. And the UK, again, was the first country to pass a Climate Change Act, which it did in 2008. And we have since had several carbon budgets and a number of other initiatives, the carbon reduction commitment. We've had the feed-in tariff to boost the renewable industry. And eventually, after a long time, and in my opinion, far later than should have been, we have had a ban on various high energy light bulbs, all being replaced with LED. Academics will have had an input on all of this, and the one that stands out for me, David McKay published a book in 2009, Renewable Energy Without the Hot Air. He was indifferent as to advising on the best way forward, so he put together multiple scenarios, but the conclusion on everyone was that whichever way we go to solve the problem, it is going to be a big challenge with a lot of infrastructure that needs to go in place to get there. This, for me, the McKinsey carbon abatement cost curve is a very much underused, under-publicized route map template, call it what you will. This also came out in about 2009, and the left-hand blue triangle below the zero line shows all those technologies that can help reduce carbon emissions, but they can also save organizations money. So that blue, the area under that curve is effectively a profit center opportunity. And this was a generic model put together in 2009 that could then be applied locally to reflect local economics and geography. Over on the right-hand side, you've got, on the far right-hand side, you've got various carbon capture and storage technologies, which are effectively our backstop on getting to net zero, and unsurprisingly, they cost the most. In the middle of the list on the right-hand side, you've got solar power, photovoltaic, and also high penetration wind, which back then came with a net cost, but that has changed massively since. So in terms of the opportunity for solar, it varies, and obviously there's more sun near the equator than there is at the poles. So that's where you get most irradiation, but with the exception of, if you look at across the tropics, I think because the air is more humid there and hazy, that they generally get less. So you don't want to be right on the tropics, but somewhere close will work very well. And obviously the further away, the less sun you get. Same principle applies in UK. Our solar industry started off in Devon and Cornwall, not surprisingly, because that's where you get some of the best irradiance to pay back on that investment. And conversely, the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, particularly up on the mountains on the west side, where it's often cloudy, is not a great place to get the best output. It just means that you get less output and a longer payback. But projects are now happening more and more in Scotland because the price is coming down, payback's coming in quicker, and it's now seen as viable, especially again with pressure around net zero. This is the wind map for the world, and it's in principle the opposite. The further you go from the equator, the windier it gets. So right down in the roaring 40s, you've got southern tip of Chile, New Zealand, Tasmania, all benefiting from really high winds. We also are the windiest part of Europe. So, and specifically Scotland is the place to be for that. So it's very much horses for courses, and these two technologies complement each other. Again, the tropics get very, very little. That's just the way our global wind systems work. India doesn't get a whole lot of wind. China doesn't get that much. And you can see with the States, for instance, and South America, the Rockies and the Andes effectively block the wind, and therefore there's less. As the map of the UK, with plenty of the hotspots, the red dots up in Scotland and over on the west side of the country. So this is what the current state of play looks like for global renewable output. So the news has been for years all focused, or primarily focused on wind and solar, but jointly they're only just producing more than hydroelectric power at the moment, but clearly they are on a far more rapid exponential path right now than hydroelectric. That's what the capacity for hydroelectric looks like by country. So we've heard in the news that the impact, the environmental impact of the Chinese building lots and lots of dams on their major rivers. The good news is that they have added considerable capacity to global hydroelectric, that their capacity is roughly the same as those other nations at the bottom, all of which are the next biggest players. So some of the familiar faces, Canada, US, Russia, Norway, have had that capacity in place for a long time. Others like Brazil, India, Vietnam, alongside China, are jumping on that bandwagon. Installed solar, again, I think in terms of a UK perspective, we're very conscious of buying all our panels from China, pretty much. What we're maybe less conscious of is the fact that in 2023, China installed in its domestic market more capacity than was installed in the global market in 2022. So they're not just making it anymore, or in fact, they haven't been just making it for a long time. They have been installing it at a rate. And again, that capacity is comparable with the total of those major players at the bottom. This is the bit that surprised me the most when I was putting this together. They haven't just invested in hydroelectric and solar, which lend themselves to China. Although it's not a desperately windy place, they've also put a massive amount into wind as well. We're in the mix there, but Germany is tangibly ahead of us, even though it's not as windy there. But I think Germany has been involved, been committed to renewables for longer than most European nations. Last but not least, biofuels, the poor cousin in the mix. The US does still lead the market there. Other notable countries that are growing in that area, Brazil and Indonesia, with favorable tropical locations, easy to grow. China and India also in the mix. And Germany, again, Germany has led the anaerobic digestion market in building kit and across Europe, and also grow considerable amounts of feedstock for those plants in their home market. This is the share of slightly different slant. This is basically posing the question of your domestic consumption of power, how much of it is coming from renewables? And Norway obviously sits at the very top. noticeably also China as the workshop of the world, as it gets to make more and more and need more and more power, it's still staying ahead of the world average, whereas the US is falling behind that metric. And here in Europe, we've got Spain, Germany, and the UK all in the vanguard. Arguably, Norway is also, again, sorry, not Norway, Canada also resting on its laurels with lots of hydroelectric. In terms of case studies, I've added one more in on LEDs, but that is in an appendix. This technology got going a long time ago. I first started to look at it closely in 2008, and since then the price has dropped by about 96%, and it saves about 90% of the power compared with, for instance, a halogen spotlight in your kitchen or bathroom. So it's fantastic for energy efficiency. It also, if you use it not in that standard format of full color spectrum, but if you use red, green, blue for farming, it makes vertical farming, i.e. indoor, both viable and predictable 24/7, 365 days a year, which makes for better employment, and it also makes for more secure food supply. Solar PV, if you look at the prices that were being paid for modules when the feed-in tariff started in 2010, and you look at the prices today, they have dropped about 97%. So these are very, very different industries from when they started. And last but not least, a technology that a few people have heard of, but many haven't. PowerPerfector is a British company that bought technology from the Japanese, and it's, again, an energy efficiency solution. It also, so it saves power consumption. It also protects your whole fleet of electrical equipment, but it is akin to a transformer, and therefore it's got a lot of copper and some steel, and therefore there's been a modest price drop, but only insofar as commodity prices are going to dictate substantially where it comes in. Given that solar panels have come down by as much as they have, they are now a very small proportion of the total installation costs. So if they have dropped that much, and some of the other component costs are difficult to shift, then at first blush you say, well, there's not much prospect for improvement. But actually there is, because at the moment we are installing panels that are about 25% efficient. But if by 2050, following the green line at the top, we can get to 50% efficiency, then that means you're getting twice as much power from every square meter of installation as opposed to 25%. And therefore, if you've doubled your output, you've again halved your unit cost, even if you can't move the other costs by that much. So there's still plenty of reason to expect unit costs to keep coming down. And here that's evident. If you look at this, okay, this is a US slide, but if you look at the residential market back in 2010, and this is using something that the accountants in particular are keen to apply for renewables, given that you've got this big upfront capex and a very modest amount of maintenance thereafter, typically for 25 years, the question is, what is the levelized cost of energy? And if you basically discount the cash flows and spread that out across 25 years of output. So for residential PV, it was 50 cents, and our feed-in tariff for up to a 5 kilowatt solar roof mount was just over 40 pence. So that was essentially covering that cost, and then there was a bit of profit in it. That number has already dropped to 12.8 cents in 2020 and is predicted to be 5 cents in 5 years' time. Commercial PV, again, has seen a massive improvement between 2010 and 2020. And it's this slide, I'm not sure how old it is, I just borrowed it off the internet for illustration purposes, but the 4 cents for 2030, well, we are already looking at 3 pence per kilowatt hour levelized cost of energy on commercial PV today. That's for roof mount and ground mount, which are the more economic versions versus solar carports. And utility scale solar farms, which go on getting bigger, even less. 3 cents per kilowatt hour for producing power from a utility scale solar farm. So that's solar. In terms of PowerPerfector detail, that this was Japanese. It was designed to squeeze the last drop out of the Japanese grid, given that they were a resource-constrained island. The UK was the next obvious place to come, which is exactly what happened with the technology. Our grid operates at a nominal 240 volts, but there's a statutory limit of plus or minus 6%. So if you are next to the power station, you're likely to be getting your power at 253 volts. Farmer Giles down back of beyond is maybe down at 227 for the same reason. But if you're near the power station, expect to have high voltage. Whereas on the continent, then nominal voltage is 220, and any electrical equipment manufacturer will be designing their equipment that has an inductive load, that's motors, computers, lighting, etc., to run optimally at 220. It will still operate here, but it will be overpowered, and 253 equates to 33 volts, or 15% more than you need to operate the equipment optimally. So that's 15% of waste on your power bill, and waste equals heat equals wear and tear. So the equipment runs out and fails quicker as well. PowerPerfector can basically demonstrate savings and guarantee them based on a statistical protocol, the IPMVP. Companies themselves can then take a view on the softer savings of wear and tear, but in an ideal world, it'll take you a long while to find out when stuff does fail, because it should last longer. The UK company has also moved the technology on. So there was the basic unit. There's now a second technology that uses an electrical solution, thyristors, to improve performance. And today there's an electronic version with near instant adjustment. That means that you track 220 volts precisely wherever you want to fit it. Most people are motivated to invest because of the savings. The land registry is a case in point where their mission critical activity is keeping their computer systems live so that people can do searches on it. So for them, investing in this equipment was an investment in guaranteeing business continuity. And a hotel in East London found itself with very high voltage. That again, they were near the power station. They'd installed LEDs throughout the hotel, and they were popping like billy-o. So they installed it to protect, first and foremost, protect that LED investment, and also have the benefit of lower energy bills anyway. So it's a double whammy, or double dip. You save on power, and you save in other ways too, from power quality benefits. Well, one of the last slides is effectively what the accountants want to see, the scores on the doors. So if you take a typical supply these days from the grid, you've got a number of fixed charges and a number of variable charges, and typically the variable charges are going to total about £200 per megawatt hour, or 20 pence per kilowatt hour. We've seen battery storage costs come down rapidly in the last few years. So we can install a kilowatt hour battery storage for about £300 that will save £50 through shifting consumption and arbitrage over a year. So a 6-year payback. Again, getting back to the levelized cost of energy, that's about £54 per megawatt hour. So in round terms, you save 3/4. One of the things that will come with battery storage is when cars are enabled to do vehicle to grid charging, but we don't know what that's going to look like yet. With solar, roof mounted and ground mount, these numbers can vary. They're just by illustration. Let's say that's, and this is commercial and industrial, not utility scale. Let's say that's £700. If you're on the south coast, that could save you £200 a year per kilowatt peak installed. That's a 3.5-year payback, £32 per megawatt hour levelized cost of energy. Solar carports are about double, because you have to put a big frame up before you can then attach your system. So that is double the payback, double the LCOE. Wind turbines can be better. They cost more, but in this part of the world, they will produce about twice as much in a year as solar. And then last but not least, voltage optimization. That's got maybe a 2.5-year payback, sometimes better. So that looks more like £23 levelized cost of energy. But all these numbers are worked out on a 25-year life. The PowerPerfector unit has a design life of 50 years. So you could arguably halve that 23 to 11. And if you are in a business where you feel that the value of the soft savings from power quality benefits are equal to the hard savings on the power bill, then you're down at £6 per megawatt hour against 200 to consume from the grid. So the savings are substantial, massive, call it what you will. Final thoughts. Last year, the world produced just under 15% of its energy from renewables. And yet we have an aspiration to get to net zero by 2050. So that does, at first blush, look like a serious challenge. But if commercial and industrial scale roof and ground mount PV is already 85% cheaper than grid consumption, if wind power is equally compelling, if utility scale wind and solar is even more economic, then little wonder that GB Energy has been set up. And I suspect GB Energy is maybe a more pragmatic way to capture value for the whole country, for the population, than possibly to try and re-engineer regulation about how power is marketed, because it doesn't work, certainly doesn't work for the poorest in society. It's the people who can afford the capex on this who stand to benefit. This is all achievable. There are plenty of cases where, when a company doubles its lifetime output, it reduces its unit costs by 20 to 30%. And so if you quadruple that lifetime output, you halve the unit cost. So that goes a long way to explaining, and that phenomenon has been seen in loads of industries over the years. It goes a long way to explaining why the cost of LEDs and the cost of solar panels has dropped so much. Getting back to Glasgow 2021, when, as I say, the shift was tangible. People are no longer just talking about sustainability as a good thing to do. Any large organization, I found within a fortnight of Glasgow at a trade show, any large organization, public or private, was suddenly talking about aiming for net zero, not just carbon reduction, net zero. Almost without exception, they were aiming for 2030. So with 5 years to go, I suspect that pressure / ambition is going to translate into continuing exponential growth of solar and wind. And there's plenty of storage technologies at various stages that can help finesse and arbitrage that output. And as we get to cheaper and cheaper power, then that, I believe, in turn will facilitate carbon capture, hydrogen production, biofuel, etc., which just makes the rest of the economy work that bit easier than trying to do absolutely everything with power. So the end is not nigh, but it's bloody urgent to sustain accelerated growth. And the best time to act on today's opportunity was yesterday. I work both with Flexisolar and PowerPerfector. Flexisolar is a subsidiary of Aggreko, and Flexisolar itself does focus on solar carports, but we can deliver within the Aggreko family all PV formats, roof mount, ground mount as well as battery energy and storage and EV charging. That's the parent company there, and PowerPerfector is owned by IESCO. So that's the commercial pitch on the back of all the information.
That's great. Thanks so much, Robert. It's so interesting, Robert. Thank you very much. Yes, I forgot to mention in the first instance to put any questions that you might have in the chat box, which you're very welcome to do. But this is the time for any questions for Robert or sharing of your own experiences. So does anybody have any questions for today? Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Robert?
Yeah, if you like, I can scroll down and go through the LED case study. So I've got 3 examples from 2008, a couple from 2021, and an update from 2025. And suffice to say that halogens were banned in 2021 anyway, so it's a moot point looking at this, but it makes for interesting reading. A high power halogen in your kitchen or bathroom or whatever would use 50 watts. 17 years ago, an LED replacement would use 10. Today, that's down to 5. So it's a 90% reduction in power consumption. And the efficiency of, i.e. lumens per watt for the LEDs has gone up from 50 to 100 necessarily. So in each instance, you're getting about 500 lumens from that light bulb. Today's LEDs are about 60% efficient, i.e. of that 5 watts, 3 of it gets turned into light and the other 2 gets turned into heat. But if they're all doing the same, then the 50 watt halogen is also using 3 watts to produce light and 47 watts to produce heat. So that's why you used to burn your hands if you touch one. The color rendition on halogen is 100%, it's a very good light source, whereas LEDs have been improving, and today they're up at around about 90%, so they're not quite perfect. And you may remember early days, people didn't like LED because it was a very blue light. That has since gone, and you can now get cool white, but you can also get warm white that feels more homely. The life expectancy on a halogen is on a decent halogen is about 2,000 hours. The life expectancy on LEDs has crept up from 10 to 20 to 25,000 hours. And the unit price has, again, absolutely plummeted. You typically pay about $12.50 for an LED replacement back in 2008. Not Screwfix. Another warehouse, you can pick up a 5 watt LED for 50 pence. So it's now cheaper than your well, halogens shouldn't be in the supermarket anymore, but when they were last there, they were still about £2. So fitting LED has now become cheaper than replacing a traditional light bulb. It's going to last 10 times as long, and it's going to use 10% of the power. And if you then take a scenario where that light bulb is in a hotel corridor, so it's running 24/7, and the hotel's having to run HVAC to cool the corridor because it's got lots of halogens warming it up. HVAC's only about 40% efficient, so the sucking all that heat out costs more than twice as much as the waste heat in the first place, which basically means that in the bottom right-hand corner of that slide, the payback, if halogens were still around, of replacing it with an LED is 1 day. And that's why, for my money, the government should have acted years ago, because we've long had a situation where we shouldn't be allowed to fit old-fashioned technology because it was wasting everybody's money as well as energy and carbon. But anyway, with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Any questions? Anybody want to share any of their experiences before we potentially wrap up today? Okay, I think we're all done then. So just want to say thanks ever so much, Robert, for your time and all your effort with that very informative presentation. It's been really great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as I say, Christiane will send out the email content to everybody after. So once again, thank you, Robert, and thank you to all of those who were able to join today. Hopefully we'll see you at the next session at the end of September. Okay, thank you.